Mitch McConnell, the longest-serving Republican leader in Senate history, has voiced a grim warning about America's future. Speaking with the Lexington Herald-Leader as he enters his final year in public office, McConnell described the current international moment as the most dangerous since the years leading up to the Second World War. His comments were aimed mainly at Donald Trump's approach to tariffs and foreign relations, but they carry wider resonance in a nation where democratic norms are being tested as never before. He cited the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930, which imposed steep tariffs during the Great Depression and is now seen as a measure that deepened international collapse and international instability. In McConnell's view, Trump's revival of America First trade policies risks echoing those mistakes, pointing to the coordination among autocratic leaders in Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. He argued that the United States faces a coalition of governments united in their antagonism toward American influence. McConnell acknowledged the ongoing war in Ukraine as a stark example of what happens when autocrats go unchecked. He said U.S. support for Kiev was not just charity, but also a way to strengthen American industries, since much of the aid was spent domestically on weapons production. When you talk about preparedness, we're not where we need to be, he admitted. Yet when he sounded alarms about dictators overseas, he avoided mentioning the increasingly authoritarian practices of Trump at home. That omission is telling. As Senate Majority Leader, McConnell blocked Barack Obama's final Supreme Court nominee, then expedited Trump's choices, locking in a conservative supermajority that has since expanded presidential power in ways critics say benefit Trump personally. The court's controversial ruling granting Trump sweeping legal immunity underscored that reality. McConnell now invokes history to warn against isolationism, yet he skirts the ways in which his own maneuvers empowered the very figure most willing to erode democratic guardrails inside the United States. The uncomfortable truth is that the country has already crossed into authoritarian terrain. The change did not occur in a single dramatic event, but through an accumulation of broken norms and ignored restraints. Over time, lines blurred until they vanished altogether. What once seemed unthinkable, armed soldiers patrolling civilian streets, political opponents threatened with military takeover, and citizens forced to produce identification on command, has become an everyday reality. Washington, D.C. increasingly resembles an occupied city rather than the capital of a functioning democracy. This is the shape of American authoritarianism. A president who uses federal forces against elected rivals, deploys troops to states over the objections of local leaders, and allows law enforcement to detain protesters without due process. What has long been described as a slippery slope is no longer hypothetical. The slope has ended, and the ground beneath has shifted. The transformation extends beyond policing. Businesses are pressured to pledge loyalty or face retribution through arbitrary taxes and regulations. Foreign governments curry favor with personal gifts for the president, blurring statecraft with bribery. Cultural expression is restricted as books are pulled from shelves, artists silenced, and even athletes judged by their political allegiance. At the same time, inconvenient critics disappear into opaque legal systems or are exiled abroad. Federal agencies that once served as neutral enforcers of law are hollowed out, their staff purged for failing to display sufficient loyalty. Even allies of the president are not safe if they hesitate or dissent. What makes this slide particularly alarming is the passivity of the institutions designed to resist it. Congress has largely ceded its oversight role, immobilized by partisanship and fear. The Supreme Court, with a majority shaped by Trump, has repeatedly sided with him. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson warned in a recent dissent that the court had effectively turned constitutional law into a game where rules shift constantly to guarantee the president's victory. McConnell, who once prided himself on building that judicial majority, now watches as it clears the path for authoritarian governance. Meanwhile, the Democratic opposition has failed to rise to the occasion. Governors like Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker have been forthright about the danger, but national leaders have remained muted. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have not coordinated a strong counter-response to the militarization of the Capitol. Aging party figures, long familiar to voters, often seem absent or hesitant, leaving a vacuum at precisely the moment when clarity is most needed. The contrast is stark. One party fully mobilized for power, the other divided and indecisive. The roots of this crisis reach back well before Trump. During the 2008 financial meltdown, House Republicans shocked observers by rejecting an emergency bailout plan that leaders across both parties insisted was necessary to prevent economic collapse. That vote exposed a nihilistic current in the GOP that was willing to risk destruction for ideological gain. Trump has tapped into that energy, turning the party into a vehicle for personal ambition rather than policy. Even the January 6 insurrection did not mark the end of his influence. Within weeks, party leaders who had condemned him were back at Mar-a-Lago, eager to prove their loyalty. Now, with Republicans in command of the presidency, Congress, and the courts, the party has dismantled the constitutional checks that once restrained executive overreach. As the nation approaches its 250th anniversary, instead of preparing to celebrate democratic resilience, it finds itself reckoning with authoritarian consolidation. Trump is entrenching his hold on power while opponents scramble to respond. McConnell is right that the international climate recalls the 1930s, but he and his colleagues cannot ignore their role in allowing similar conditions to take root at home. The gravest threat is not just the rise of autocrats abroad, but the authoritarianism that has taken firm hold within America's borders. The future remains uncertain. The United States may end up resembling Hungary, a country that retains elections but lacks meaningful democratic safeguards, or it may continue down a darker path closer to Germany in the early 1930s. What is clear, though, is that the United States has already changed. Even if it manages to reclaim some measure of democratic stability, the nation that once presented itself as a global beacon of liberty might never be the same again. And even in this precarious moment, there are reminders that democracy is not entirely lost. Courts have begun pushing back against some of the most aggressive overreaches. Judges have ruled that Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles was illegal, that his plan to expel migrants to Venezuela violated both U.S. and international law, and that his unilateral tariffs imposed without congressional consent broke constitutional limits. These decisions matter, not only for the people directly affected, but for the principle that presidential power is not absolute. They show that, despite years of erosion, key institutions can still function as a check on authoritarianism. For Americans searching for hope, these rulings suggest a path forward. The law itself, upheld by judges willing to resist political intimidation, remains a tool for accountability. If democracy is to survive this era, it will be because citizens, institutions, and courts continue to insist that no leader is above the Constitution. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5-Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.